few of them before. So.
Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. This is Event Trader here. Going to be joined by Carmine Atteo. Good morning, everybody. This is Event Trader here. Going to be joined by Carmine Atteo shortly. We're going to take a quick look at some of the geopolitical events that have unfolded and look ahead at what we can expect this week in terms of House hearings and potential headline-moving news that we want to be on the lookout for. So, Carmine, are you here with us?
Yes. Hey, how you doing, Gavin? How you doing, Gavin? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Carmine.
Okay, great. No problem.
So, so how was your weekend?
Oh, pretty good. Yours?
Doing pretty good. Just nothing too exciting here. I was looking around at some of the news of note over the weekend, and I just figured we'd do a recap of it first. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, Carmine, to start off, though, was there's some recent reports about Commerce Secretary Wibur Ross potentially stepping down after the consensus numbers have been released. So I just wanted to ask you if you had any early thoughts on that, if this is in line with what you've been seeing, and if you have any idea who the predecessor or who could follow up Mr. Ross here, as that would be obviously an important job with the trade wars going on.
Absolutely. So, so there was an NBC report this morning that Commerce Secretary, President Trump, was considering firing Commerce Secretary Wibur Ross. The report says that he, quote, wants to find a more, quote, hard-charging leader for the Commerce Secretary. So I would assume that it could be someone with similar trade views to Wibur Ross, maybe even a little more hawkish. Based on that language. So we'll have to wait and see who replaces him, what his views are. But the important thing here is that the president is really directing all of these Commerce Department investigations. It's not like Wibur Ross is just doing these things on his own. So he, basically, I don't really see too much change. There might be some more of a delay with the Huawei exemptions, because if there's a Commerce Department change within the next couple of weeks, that kind of throws everything out of whack with the Huawei exemptions, and that might get further delayed. There was a Reuters report that could come within the next 2 to 4 weeks, so we could get a list of the companies and products that would be exempted for national security reasons, and will be able to allowed to sell to Huawei. So if there's some type of transition within the Commerce Department right in the middle of that could put that out of whack and kind of delay that further. But I think that's really the only possible impact. I don't see that really impacting any of the trade discussions all that much, because more than likely whoever replaces Wibur Ross will be somebody that's just as hawkish as he is, if not more. So, and again, the president's really calling the shots here as far as launching these Commerce Department inquiries into the tariffs and things.
Okay, my understanding was that Mr. Ross made some comments about the Huawei exemptions moving faster than some had previously expected.
Yes.
Talking about the next couple of weeks. So do you think that it could just maybe be the exact opposite, in which with Mr. Ross leaving, that perhaps they're looking to get this through a little bit quicker?
Yeah, that's I never thought of it that way, but that's a good point. It just depends on, the report said sometime this summer he could leave. So, maybe they'll get this done, like you said, before he leaves, and then we won't have to worry about that for him.
Okay. So should we be downgrading comments that we see from Wibur Ross then moving forward, do you feel?
I do. But again, the person that replaces him will likely be kind of the same mold. So it's not like the person that's going to replace him is going to be some big dove on trade policy. It's going to be, based on this article, it's going to be someone that's very similar. So.
Okay. All right, let's circle back around then to last week. The French Senate voted in a digital tax legislation. I believe it's 3% of total annual revenues that is directed at companies that I believe that there's a revenue limit on who would be targeted by this tax. But really, what people are looking at is a direct attack on U.S. tech giants, Google, Facebook, Amazon. And I believe the UK is close to putting in their own 2% tax on this. And what that's doing is leading the U.S. to initiating a Section 301 investigation into France's digital tax service bill, with the idea of perhaps some retaliatory tariffs coming down the road. So you want to give us an update on that? First, if you could, just reiterate what a 301 or Section 301 investigation is and how that differs from the Section 232 for people. And then just if you can, let us know what companies could be in the sites for the USTR if there is some sort of retaliation here.
Yeah, so the difference between the Commerce Department 301 and 232, the 232s were passed during the Kennedy administration, and it gives the administration broad power to levy tariffs on specific products. The Section 301 was passed during the Nixon administration, and that gives the administration broad power to put tariffs on specific countries. So a Section 301 investigation into France's digital service tax would basically be targeting France as a country for tariffs on any specific products from France. So when we hear that, the next step is to kind of look and see what products France exports to the U.S. And so France's top exports include planes, aircraft parts, machineries, autos, and French wine. So there are some companies that are involved in these types of industries. However, their amount of exports that they come from France are pretty small. So,
Carmine, let me ask you this real quick then, because the EU retaliation, that was also taking a look at wine and cheese and everything. So would this kind of be a double tariff potentially on French wines? Is that how that's working?
Yeah, we would have to wait for the details. It could possibly be. They said that this 301 investigation is going to be proportionate. So if there's $3 billion or a 3% tax, I guess they're going to figure out a way to make whatever they feel is the negative impact on these technology companies to revert back to tariffs on France. So if there's EU tariffs following that Airbus dispute, that would be a separate thing. But if there's multiple products that are included, it could be double. I'm not sure. We'll just have to wait and see when these inquiries are completed. They might exempt one from another, so there's not a double. I'm not sure. That's just speculation. But that's definitely a good point to look out for, because French wine was one of the products listed as far as the EU tariffs for the Airbus dispute as well.
Okay. And companies with exposure to France, you're about to say?
Yeah. So again, these are very limited exposure to France, but they do operate in industries where the top French exports are. So aircraft parts, machinery, and wine and things like that. So I would look at SPR, UTX, HRL, Daimler, Mercedes, and of course Airbus, Deere, Boeing. So
and Caterpillar and Fiat as well, right?
Yeah, Caterpillar, Fiat as well. And for the wines, I would look at STZ possibly. But again, these specific companies have very little exposure to French exports. I want to make that clear. But again, when a lot of things get hit in the markets when they're not supposed to, or when it's a broad sector. So just keep these names on your radar just in case.
Okay, and one of the more underreported aspects of this, I feel, is, and from the G20, that for that matter, was a push to get an OECD-wide digital tax on these companies, which basically I've seen a lot of the French response saying once we get this in, we could repeal this tax. So is there any push forward on that? Do you expect to see any pickup in more of a region-wide taxation plan across the OECD countries?
Yeah, that's definitely possible, and I would be very anxious to see how the U.S. responds to that, because if they're getting upset over France doing this, the OECD is obviously a much broader set of countries. So, I don't know if they would initiate an investigation into that as well, but that's definitely a very good point, and we'll have to see how that plays out, especially since they're doing an investigation after a single country did attacks.
Okay. All right, moving on to the China talks. We discussed a little bit about the Wibur Ross comments and the Huawei repeal. Has there been any other updates? I know we had President Trump last week tweeting out that China was not living up to its end for the agricultural products. Was there any developments over the weekend that we should be bearing note?
Yeah, and I just seen here Kudlow's reiterating call for China to buy agricultural products. So I assume from his comments there that they haven't started doing it yet, which is in line with the reporting. So yeah, so President Trump tweeted last week that China hasn't been living up to its end of the bargain with as far as purchasing the agricultural products, and that's causing a little bit of angst in the administration. So again, this is something we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. The $300 billion tariff tranche was delayed as part of the agreement that they made at the G20. So, but again, that Commerce Department investigation is already complete, so he can put those on at any time if he feels that these talks aren't going well. I don't think that'll happen, just to make it clear. But it's just something to definitely keep in mind. There will be a lot of back and forth here, and it'll be definitely good news if China starts purchasing these agricultural products. And definitely good news as well once the Commerce Department grants these licenses to Huawei. I think you made a very excellent point as far as the Wibur Ross situation. I think I did have it backwards out of it. Now that you said that, your point makes a lot more sense than what I was saying, that if they can get these licenses out in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think that'll move China forward more on the agricultural purchases, because there was a report a couple weeks ago saying that China was wanting to wait for the U.S. to kind of get this Huawei situation straightened out before they begun the agricultural purchases. So if that happens, and then all these kind of things fall in line, it will be a little bit more bullish for the markets overall, because we look towards more of a deal rather than at each other's throats.
Okay. Next up, let's take a quick peek at healthcare. We discussed last week the Affordable Care Act hearing in the U.S. Fifth Circuit of Appeals in Louisiana. What's the latest from there?
Yeah, I'll talk about healthcare in 1 second. Let me just circle back to Huawei for a second, though, and give you some stock picks for that could be granted licenses to sell to Huawei, which will be bullish for these stocks. Now, ACIA was acquired by Cisco, so they're not going to see much impact once this, even if they're on the list. So, I guess you could see a moderate impact of Cisco, but they're such a big company, it probably won't make that much of a difference. But some other names are FNSR and Light and Qualcomm. So to keep those on your radar as well, for once these licenses go into effect, it'll be bullish for those names. So as far as healthcare, there was a hearing in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Louisiana on the Obamacare individual mandate and whether it's unconstitutional or not. According to the New York Times, the court appears likely to uphold the Texas ruling that the individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional, but they are still in question about voiding the entire law. So again, we went over this a little bit last week, but just to repeat, if this law is upheld through the entire court system, it would be negative for hospital stocks, because they would lose the actual new customers. They would have more overhead and more failed payments and things like that, because they have less uninsured people. So we saw some of the hospital stocks decline last week as these court proceedings were going on. I said that this court was heavily conservative, so it forced reason that some of the judges were coming out making negative comments about Obamacare. But again, any ruling that this court makes in Louisiana, this is the appeals court, so this is a second level up from the Supreme Court. So any ruling that the appeals court makes will be immediately appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and that probably won't be settled until 2020. So if there's any weakness in these hospital stocks following this ruling, it's probably going to come out next month. there might be a buying opportunity because there will be headlines in the next week or so that these 20 states that are against this will be repealing over to the Supreme Court.
Okay. One other item on the drug front, we saw a lot of the pharmacy benefit managers and healthcare players rallying last week. And that was basically on Thursday, the Trump administration reversed its proposed overhaul of rebates collected by the drug middlemen.
Yeah.
Have you looked at all into this matter? Do you have any color on this?
Yeah. So basically, what happened was they had the HHS and the White House were kind of in disagreement about this one. So let me look here. See, there was several stocks that do this that will be most impacted. These are the distributors. So these are the ABCs, the MCKs, and the CAHs of the world. The goal of this policy was to get list prices down, but there was an internal debate within the administration about whether the plan would have that intended effect. And I guess the people that were against it kind of won out on this, and they pulled this plan. So this would have been negative for the middlemen, which are the distributors like ABC, MCK, and CH. But since the plan was reversed, they, stocks rallied on that. So I wouldn't expect this to come up again. It looks like they're pretty much settled that they're not going to be able to do this. So again, also a modest impact for the health insurance stocks, but the health insurance stocks were kind of rallying, which we'll get to in a minute anyway, because of more people are trying to figure out the healthcare legislation that could be coming from the presidential candidates. So.
And with that in mind, we're seeing a bit of a disagreement between Biden and Sanders at the moment, two of the front runners. You want to fill us in on what the latest debate is on the Democratic? I mean, we know where the Trump administration pretty much stands. So the question is trying to figure out who's going to lead the Democrats and what some of their ideas are. So any updates from that over the weekend?
Yeah, so former Vice President and presidential candidate Joe Biden warned about the consequences of a government-run health care plan, and Senator and Bernie Sanders from Vermont supported such a plan. So they're kind of going back and forth on that. And we did a podcast, you and I, on April 23rd, and we kind of explained the complexities and the difficulties of getting such a legislation like Medicare for All passed. And since then, UNH has rallied over 17%. So that's one I still like. They report earnings on Thursday morning.
Yeah.
So that's one I still like here as a playoff of this, because I firmly believe that any legislation is going to be very difficult to pass because they would need 60 votes in the Senate to be able to do that, and a simple majority in the House and a president's signature. So, again, I'm not going to go through all that again, but you can go back to our April 23rd podcast for more information on that.
Yeah, and I still have a piece left on that UNH swing along that I took following our conversation with Carmine here. So eyeing up that 270 level, which we're not all that far away for possibly taking the final piece off at this time. Moving on, Carmine, let's take a look. What can we look forward to this week in terms of House and Senate hearings?
Yeah, so on Tuesday, the House is having a couple hearings on technology. So the first one is going to be representatives from Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Apple are going to testify to the House Judiciary Committee on antitrust issues. There's not going to be any big names. There are going to be more, lawyers and things like that from each company. So this is something we'll have to keep an eye on. But again, any legislation will have to get approved by both houses. So this is just the first step of this process, and it's kind of hard to tell right now what will come out of this, if anything. But there might be some negative headlines crossing on these particular companies. So just being alert for that. But just keep in mind that this is we're in inning number one here of this process.
If anything we saw from Microsoft, this could be a decade-long process. So
yeah, exactly.
Trying to trade it on day one of the first inning on the first pitch probably isn't going to do you a lot of good.
Right. I always say too, selling the stock. Like we kind of mentioned this in our April 23rd podcast too, when we were talking about the Medicare for All thing, kind of selling a stock because of something a presidential candidate says to me is like, leaving your home team in your football game because they lost the coin toss. So, but anyway, the next House hearing would be examining proposed cryptocurrency and its impact on consumers.
This is on Wednesday, correct?
Yeah, this is Wednesday. This is the House hearing on Wednesday. So David Marcus, Facebook's head of Calibra, will testify to the House Financial Services Committee. So if there was any indication about where everybody stood, you basically saw that in the House Financial Services Committee hearing with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. There was a lot of negative comments toward this cryptocurrency, and they, wanted to know more information about what would happen. And that's really the bear case about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies from the bears is that, it's very unlikely that the U.S. government or any government really would want to have some currency competing with the U.S. dollar. So, I mean, this is, full disclosure, I'm not the biggest believer in cryptocurrency, to put it mildly, but, this is something that we'll have to watch and look forward to because I think there's going to be bipartisan opposition to any type of Calibra or any type of financial product from these companies, but we'll see what happens.
All right. And then on the Senate side of things, what should we be looking for this week?
Yeah, so the Senate's going to have the hearing on Calibra as well, so on Tuesday. So the Senate's going to be on Tuesday, and the House is going to be on Wednesday for Calibra, and Facebook's head, David Marcus, will testify at both. And on Tuesday at 2:30 Eastern Time, there's going to be a hearing on Google and censorship through search engines. So again, I wouldn't expect too much to come out of that one. But the main event as far as hearings this week are going to be those Facebook hearings, because there's a lot of stocks that are tied. Not only Facebook, but a lot of stocks that are tied to cryptocurrencies like Overstock and things like that. So keep those on your radar as well for any news that comes out of this, because I would expect that both sides of the aisle will be pretty steadfast in their opposition towards Facebook's Calibra product or cryptocurrencies in general.
Yeah, certainly from the Powell testimony, we can't think that David Marcus is going to have a fun 2 days up on Capitol Hill. Yeah. All right, Carmine, is there anything else that we haven't touched upon that we should be on the lookout for on the geopolitical side?
No, that's pretty much it.
What about an update from Mnuchin possibly going to China? Should we be looking for anything on that this week, or any rumors of phone calls being held?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get some reports that they talked on the phone and things are going well. There haven't been too many interviews for representatives except for just Cullo right now. So we'll look for more interviews from the people and see how that's going. Mnuchin was supposed to go to Beijing pending the outcome of the phone conversations this week. So hopefully maybe by the end of the week we'll have some date on that and we'll be able to pass that along. That'll definitely be a positive. But more of a positive, I think, again, would be these Huawei exemptions, to get that cleared out of the way, so then China can go ahead and start buying these agricultural products. I think that'll alleviate some of the angst within the administration about the progress of the trade talks.
Okay, beautiful. All right, Carmine, then with that in mind, I'll let you get going on your end there. I know we got earnings season coming up, which is going to be busy for all. So thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Gavin.
Okay, take care.